Is God colorblind? Leave your answers in the comments before you watch the rest of this video. I went to a young adult conference over the weekend, and I heard someone speak by the name of Marcus Hayes, and he did a class called How Can Christians Help Ease the Racial Tensions in America? And he asked the question, is God colorblind? I both agreed that no, God's not colorblind. He actually said that God is color engaging. Before I start the rest of this video, I want to make sure that if you're white and you just think, I don't care about race, talking about race is hurting this country, please don't click out. Just don't. If you're an African American or some type of minority and I say something that's insulting, offensive, ignorant, and not accurate, please leave it in the comments and tell me so that I don't make the same mistake again, because we're here to learn. So at this conference, I heard two people speak about this topic. Marcus Hayes did the class, and then Bryan Lorritts, I think that's his name, he did a sermon about it. And Bryan Lorritts talked about how Paul the Apostle had both Jews and Gentile converts. If you know anything about Jews and Gentiles, you know they did not get along. So, to fix this problem, he had the Jews over here and the Gentiles over here. That's not what happened. What happened was he took two groups of people who hated each other and brought them together, because that's what Jesus does. Bryan Lorritts talked about how the synagogue back in Paul's day had different sections for different people. So there was a section for the Gentiles, there was a section for the women, there was a section for the Jews, there was a section for the Levitical priests. When Jesus died, those sections were torn down. We see this when the temple curtain was torn. Jesus broke down those walls. But what Christ has done a really good job of tearing down, the Christians have done a really good job of building back up. Bryan Lorritts talked about how Christ tore down the wall of legislative segregation, but Christians have done a really good job of building back the wall of voluntary segregation. What I mean by that is, if you look at your church, if you're in a diverse area, I'm speaking to you, Brownsburg and Avon. If you're in a diverse area, your church should reflect that. If not, then there's something wrong. Someone brought up something called the Finding Nemo effect. So, in the movie, Nemo is taken out of the sea and put into the fish tank. Well, you all know what I'm talking about. And none of the other fish come up and see him, because he smells like the ocean. Or any of the other fish will interact with him, he has to be cleaned. So he smells just like everybody else. And I think that's what happens in a lot of our churches today. They don't say that in so many words, but it comes across from interactions, body language, Facebook posts. We give off a vibe of you're not welcome unless you're just like us. You're not welcome unless you talk like us, dress like us, act like us, hold the same political beliefs as us. And that's not what the gospel is about. And so Bryan Lorritts brought up a Bible passage. Let me go get it. 1 Corinthians 9:19 through 23, and I'm going to read it real fast. Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone, to win as many as possible. To the Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. So that Bible passage is pretty self-explanatory. We have to feel what other people feel. We have to step in their shoes. We have to become like they are. And Bryan Lorritts brought up this point of how black people, to become successful, have to interact with white people. They sort of have to step in their shoes. But white people, to become successful, they don't have to interact with black people or people ethnically different than they are. That's not what the gospel is about. At all. How can we make our churches more diverse? both of the speakers actually said, sanctuaries are made from the dinner table and living room. So what does that mean? You get to have friends. But you don't get to just have friends. You have to have friends with a peer. Because the only interaction you have with someone that's ethnically different than you is you holding an Ethiopian baby and posting a picture to Instagram. That's not good enough. That's actually perpetuating the myth of a savior complex or the Finding Nemo effect. And I'm not talking about having like a token black friend. I'm talking about being willing to have a relationship with someone that's different than you. Someone that believes differently than you, that acts differently than you, that votes differently than you. Because that's what heaven's gonna look like. Newsflash, I know there's gonna be more than one black person in heaven. I think it's interesting too, I didn't know this until Bryan Lorritts talked about it. The reason Paul was arrested the last time was because he took, I'm assuming it... Sorry, Beth. Just put that back up there. Okay, so the reason Paul was arrested the last time... I'm just gonna hang this back up, Beth, in a second. So the reason Paul was arrested the last time was because he took, I'm assuming a Gentile, into the forbidden part of the temple, or the sanctuary, or the synagogue. And that's our gospel. Our gospel is radical, and it's about breaking down walls. So instead of building them back up, let's start tearing them down. And I think I'm going to end this video. There's going to be a part 2. I've never made a part 2 video, but there's going to be a part 2. And I'm going to talk about a little bit more of what Marcus Hayes spoke about. If you like this video, you can give it a thumbs up. If you think this is worth sharing, you can share it. If you want to subscribe, you can subscribe. You don't really have to. Just, yeah. And work on breaking those walls down.